Good morning. Welcome, everyone. My name is Ashish Parekh, and I'm here with Dr. Estera Brilka and our guest, Mr. Sibin Varghese. And welcome to another episode on our podcast of Love Talks. And today, in our episode 2, we'll be discussing toxic relationships and also discussing manipulation. So at this point, I would like to turn it over to my lovely co-host, Dr. Estera, who will introduce our guest, Mr. Sabine, and then we will go into our podcast.
Hi everyone, this is Astera. Today we will be talking about toxic relationships and manipulation in relationships. So these two topics, they pretty often come together because a toxic relationship is a relationship in which manipulation is present pretty often on a daily basis. So just to let you know what manipulation in relationships are. Psychological manipulation is defined as exercising of undue influence through mental distortion and also emotional exploitation, or a partner or also other members of the family, for example, children. The manipulator, the intentions that they have is to seize power, control, or to gain some benefits and privileges from the manipulated partner or other family member that otherwise they wouldn't get. And there are different forms of manipulations that we will discuss during this episode. And the most common ones are gaslighting, triangulation, and, for example, silent treatment. And those who manipulate in relationships are usually those who can detect our weaknesses, who can use those weaknesses against us, convince us to give up something, for example, in order to serve the interests of the manipulator and fulfill their needs. And also, unfortunately, once a manipulator has succeeded, you can be quite sure that this kind of manipulation in this form or another will happen again, because once they have succeeded, they will be very, very prone to do it again. And manipulation in relationships is most common when one of the partners, or at least one of the partners, is someone who is a narcissist, so basically someone with a narcissistic personality disorder, also someone with antisocial personality disorder or borderline personality disorder, or also psychopaths. And what all these disorders have in common is a lack of empathy. So manipulation is quite easy for these people because they can't see themselves in your shoes. So they don't have any remorse. That's the second trait that is common. So they don't really feel that they are doing anything wrong. And the third common trait is that they cannot handle responsibility. So when they manipulate, it's not about them manipulating, exerting the influence, but it's about their victims letting them do it. So that's a common thing in manipulation. So those who manipulate, they don't really feel bad about it. And unfortunately, toxic relationships in which manipulation is present, are not that uncommon. And they are quite common everywhere in the world. It doesn't really matter from what culture you come from. There are people with this kind of disorders, like the narcissistic personality disorder, everywhere. So today we are here to talk a bit about toxic relationships, manipulation, our experience from our relationships. And as Ashish mentioned already, we have a guest, Sibin. Sibin is from India. Welcome, Sibin. Thank you very much for accepting our invitation today.
Oh, no, thank you, Esther. It's an absolute honor to be here.
Okay, so, for starters, I wanted to discuss, a thing that is quite of a taboo topic, even within the greatest taboo topic of toxic relationships and manipulation, because when we talk about toxic relationships, we pretty often, assume that it's a female who is manipulated. Somehow, because of any other kind of violence, like physical violence, being more often done by men, which is also not entirely true, because there are women who use physical violence against their spouses or boyfriends. But somehow, in the people's mentality, when we talk about abuse or toxicity in relationships, we pretty often assume that it's men, that, the spouse or the boyfriend is the one that is manipulating. And that's not really what is happening, because it can be actually a woman as well. And that happens probably as often. But somehow, well, we don't really talk about it. Because it's something cultural. Men don't really want to admit that they are in abusive relationships, whether it's physical abuse or whether it's psychological abuse. And that topic is not really that much discussed. And well, now there is a bit more awareness about it, that well, violence or physical or psychological can actually happen to everyone, regardless of the gender. But nevertheless, men are still not that happy to talk about that. So what do you think, guys? Why is it that men tend to avoid that kind of topics? If they don't really want to talk about their relationships, if there was some sort of psychological abuse there or manipulation?
Um, to be very honest, from a personal experience point of view, right? So, I was the kind of guy, or I am the kind of guy who does not give up on relationship, right? Because I value it to the very end. Now, in my scenario, I held it up for a few years before the bubble broke. It was just getting too much, and it was getting the best out of me in terms of my health, my work life, everything. And it was interfering everywhere. And as much as I tried to keep it out of the door when I used to walk into work, it still kept running into my head, because that the thoughts would come in the moment you're idle. They say that an idle mind is a devil's workshop. So all the thoughts used to come back, and it started hitting. So that's where I really felt that I need help, and I had to reach out to someone to actually discuss about it. So I mean, in my case, it was a couple of my friends who actually I literally spoke to, but it was eventually and I don't hate to say this, or I don't feel my pride is, I'm going to lose my pride, but I actually broke down in front of my mother. And it was after 6 years that I actually went and spoke to my mom, and I told her, what, this is just not working. Things are getting a little too much for me. As much as I try to hide it from you, that things are fine but with me and my partner and everything, but at the end, I needed some help. I needed some support. I needed some guidance as to what I can do differently, or what I need to do differently from my standpoint. Because whatever I tried to do, or whatever I applied in my relationship, nothing seemed to be just working. Everything used to just backfire. So it could be a pride issue where men don't want to talk about it. The male ego, of course, that's there. I mean, we are born to be tough. But hey, you know what? We are the weakest, to be very honest with you. I mean, and like I said, I don't, I say it with pride, that yeah, men are weak. They need that emotional support. And generally, it is from the opposite side that we get that support. So yeah, you have to lean over somewhere.
Well, thank you very much for sharing your experience with us, because it's quite uncommon for a man to be so open about their relationship and how it affected them at the time. But yeah, what you said is actually quite interesting, because I know that in India, marriages are like a big thing. It's pretty much like in my culture, because I come from Poland, and well, at least until the 90s, because in Poland the majority of people are Catholics. Also, it's kind of said that the marriage is made in heaven. So yeah, so basically people and to somehow avoid the topic of being not very happy in their relationship, or being manipulated, or dealing with this kind of things on a daily basis that they would prefer not to deal with. But I think that, yeah, like trying to somehow revive the relationship or rescue the relationship from getting a divorce in the end is probably something that very many people do. The problem with that is actually that you have to know when to let go. And we don't really know, right? Because, well, we're just trying to justify our partner's behavior. Probably at some point we are not the ones without any sins either. And this is how it goes. And many people, they are in that kind of relationship for years, and they somehow still think that, well, maybe something in the end will work out. Maybe, you know, if we go to a couples therapy or go to some spiritual advisor or a priest or whoever else, it will let us, you know, have a better relationship. But unfortunately, if you are in a toxic relationship with, for example, a narcissist, this is not going to work. That's actually something that that is common for this kind of relationship. Whatever you would be doing, it's not going to work, because it's your partner who is manipulating, who's getting something from the relationship, and you are sort of breadcrumbed in the relationship. And in the end, you know, whatever you are investing in the relationship, your money, your health, your time, because, well, time is something that we are not being given back. Yeah, if you invest 10 years in a relationship, well, this is what it is, right? So whatever we are investing in that kind of relationship is pretty often a sunk cost. And if you know what the sunk cost is like in business. So when you're investing into something and you don't get anything back, but that's at some point you have invested so much that you don't actually want to leave that business or a relationship in that matter, because, well, you think that it's just such a loss that if you leave now, you will just lose everything. And you think and you hope that you win something, that the relationship will be better. And then you keep investing. But in the end, you anyway lose even more. So that is something that I think keeps many people in that kind of a relationship, because they are just also afraid to lose everything that they have invested, right? Because if we are talking about a long-term relationship or a marriage, there is, you know, it's about the time, it's about your mental well-being, mental health. You said, Sibin, that, well, you were at some point starting being quite affected by what was going on in your relationship. But it's also about finances and money, you know. Yeah, we know how it is. Yeah, when you get the divorce, or even when you split with a partner that you've been for a long time with. So people are quite often very afraid to move on. But that's probably not something that we should be afraid, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, see, the thing is with me, like I said, I don't give up on relationship. Be anyone, I mean, be it family, be it friends, or anyone. I didn't take the cues at the right time to understand that, okay, you know what, it's about time to quit. And when I had my discussions with friends or family or whoever, they told me, why did you wait this long? I mean, this should have been taken care of a lot sooner. You should have involved your family, or you should have gone for therapy. But the fact of the matter is, I mean, I'm ready for therapy. Is my partner ready for therapy? No, she wasn't. Right. So even though trying so much, I mean, involving third parties, trying to see if, like, okay, if I bring in a friend, probably have a discussion and so on and so forth. It was, there was a point when I did get someone I invited someone for a family dinner, because it was one of the festivals. I don't remember which one. And during that time, the behavior of my partner was totally different. Right. And when I went to drop off my friend, my friend was asking, are you sure that you're going through this? I mean, it doesn't look like, I mean, your partner doesn't look like. I'm like, see, the thing is, I don't know, she's looking, she's appeared different in front of you, but, it's different when it's me. And the moment I finished that conversation, I got a call. Okay. And I just told her, you know what? I told my friend, just wait for a couple of minutes. You will come to know the true self. I answered the phone. I was in my car. I answered the phone. And the way my partner was speaking, it was totally different than what my friend experienced. And then my friend was like, dude, you really need to get out of this. You've wasted too much of time. You invested too much of time. You invested too much of money. This is just not going to work. it's about time you quit it. So my advice to people, yeah, the moment you start getting the cues, try talk to someone. It is required rather than investing yourself so bad that it's very difficult to come out.
Mm. Yeah, I mean that's quite common what you've just described, because especially narcissists, they usually have different faces for different people, and of course they don't really want to show themselves as abusers. So when they basically talk with other people, or when you are together, like with a friend, you have a dinner or some other family function, they will be behaving, well, let's say normally, right? They will be
Yeah.
probably very sweet and very, very kind to everyone. But once everyone is out and you are with them all alone, everything changes. And that's also
Yeah.
something that we will talk more about in the today's episode as well. What are those common techniques? Because unfortunately there is a pattern, and there are
Yeah.
some techniques of manipulation that are more common than the others, and these should be those red flags. Because yeah, you said, well, as we say in Poland, everyone is wise after they have lost something, right? So
Yeah. Yeah.
basically, it's easy to say that, well, I should have reacted much, much earlier. But unfortunately, when we are in that kind of a relationship, it's not always those red flags are actually red flags to us. So, and what do you think, Ashish, about that? Because how is it in the US? Is it easier for people somehow to figure out that they are in a toxic relationship, or is it also like in India or maybe in Poland? That, well, we have this cultural issues that tell us to fight for our relationships. How is it in the
I think in
US?
the United States, it's different than maybe Poland or India. I think I see here in the United States, I think there's a lot more toxic relationships. There's a lot more manipulation. I think divorce seems more prevalent in the States as compared to other countries. I'm not saying that marriage is a bad thing, but I have noticed that there have been plenty more divorces, and obviously with COVID, with people being stuck in their own house, I'm sure people are just frustrated, and that's probably leading to also anger and other issues like that. But I think, like going to Sabine's point about manipulation and toxicity, I think sometimes I think the Indian culture can sometimes be very like forceful, or they could be like they don't believe in divorce as much. At least I know, on my parents' side or my family side, like divorce is like a big no-no, and it's like almost like a taboo. Like if you have a divorce, it's like, oh no, what happened to you? But if the relationship starts off good and then other factors just come into play and it's just not the same, it's not healthy for you or your partner to stay involved in a relationship if it's not going to be beneficial. And I think at that point, you just have to realize to make a clean break, because we all have one life to live. And if we're not happy ourselves, then there's no point in being in a relationship where we're not happy, or we're being the puppet, or we have to change who we are to fit in with anyone else. And that's just, my 2 cents. I've experienced that, but, it's one of those things where you live and learn in life. And, just based on like our conversation last week with our guest, like every guest, I mean, every couple will have quarrels, every couples will have arguments, but it's at what point does the argument then become like more toxic, that it's not healthy for either partner, and then you actually have to like go into a shell, or you're actually in a pressure cooker. And the moment you're in a pressure cooker, then I think also at the same time, there's just so much pressure from external forces that you're just gonna blow up.
Hmm. Yeah, well, it's very difficult to, be in a situation when you are, well, abused, mentally abused every day. And, well, you have to somehow deal with that. Plus, you have to perform at work, and you have to also deal with all the other things that life puts in front of you. Because relationships in which manipulation is basically, a daily reality, is something that affects us in very many different ways. And unfortunately, quite often we start seeing that only when it's already too late, like Sibin, for example, when he kind of had enough, and in front of his mother he showed that he had enough, right? And that's for many people, you know, we try to deal with that kind of manipulative partners. We try to make excuses for them, that, for example, well, it's not what they really mean, or, you know, they had a difficult childhood, that's why they are like that, or they don't think much before talking, so that's why they said this or that.
Yeah.
But, you know, if it happens once in a blue moon, of course it can happen, because, well, we are stressed, we are frustrated, even before or maybe before the COVID, we were super frustrated, sometimes with our, you know, high demanding work environments and commuting, and, you know, being really, really super busy every day. So, you know, everyone could have a moment that, well, we could just say something a bit without thinking, or maybe in anger or because of frustration. I'm not saying it's good, but that unfortunately happens sometimes. But there's a difference between something like that happening once in a while and something like that just happening every day, being just the normal way of our partner behaving, not because they are upset or they have some personal problem or problem at work and they just, you know, react on a wrong person, but it's just how they are. And we tend to make different justifications about their behaviors until at some point we start acknowledging, we get this awareness that, well, if you stop making those excuses, there is no other reason to really stay in this relationship, because once those excuses are not there, it's really abuse. Yeah.
True. The thing is, at one point of time, I mean, it's not. I don't know if it is more of a culture, because in my part of the world, though my paternal side was a little reluctant from a separation point of view, but my maternal side, they were very, very supportive. Like, if the relationship is not working, why did you even waste your time? Why did you invest so much of time? That's the first question that came through. So in terms of manipulation and toxicity, right, the worst is when you have other parties getting involved and trying to manipulate you. I mean, when you have a third person entering, so say, for example, someone from the family, and like you said, you know what, you know, it's just the way she's raised, and probably that's the reason why, you know, she spoke that way. Don't worry about it. She didn't mean it that way. There were multiple instances in my experience where the family would come up and say, you know what, she's just a child. Don't worry. She didn't mean it. She didn't mean to say it. It went on to a certain level wherein, like, the manipulation got so strong, or the distractions that were created for me, and creating an alternate reality in terms of things can get better if we do this, or things can get way better if we do that, X, Y, and Z kind of a scenario. So at one point of time, I ended up buying a house that I was not even, I was kind of reluctant to go and invest right now, because I had not reached a stage to get a mortgage, and wasn't ready for that kind of a commitment. But there was constant nagging that was coming through from the back, that, okay, you know what, we're living on rent, and, you know, we live separate from your family. We are living separate from my family. We are in a different city altogether. How many days I'm just going to be maintaining or doing the chores for a house that does not belong to us? Why should I do it? So those kind of words, and started getting into the personal thing. I mean, kept trying to hit your ego that you're not worth it, you just cannot do it, and so on and so forth. You're not capable. So getting trying to hit that ego point of view, and so on and so forth. So that is where people need to understand. I mean, like, shove your pride away as much as possible. Try to make sense, and try to understand, are you really in a situation, really in a position to actually take that kind of a step? Could be anything. I mean, and thankfully, what's best for me is that I did not have a child, right? And if I had a child, and with a partner like that, things would have been absolutely ugly,
Yeah,
right?
exactly. Because then probably, you would prefer maybe to stay for the sake of the child,
Exactly.
or a child could be used, to manipulate you as well. So that's quite often what's
Absolutely.
happening.
Absolutely.
That's
I would have definitely stayed in that relationship had I had a child, because I didn't want to ruin the child's future, right? I mean, why would a baby that is born in this relationship has to suffer, right? So it's best that stay in the relationship, try to work it out, or try to keep the other partner away as much as possible. I don't know, different things can be done, but I would have stayed had there been a child. But thankfully, I did not have that child, and that child did not have to suffer. So I'm glad that that never happened.
Yeah, I think you brought up a good point, Sabine. I think when there are kids, you don't want to use them as pawns in a relationship and be like, kind of make them feel like if the mom and dad are fighting or whatever, separated, then you don't want to tell the kids, well, look, your mom or dad abandoned you, and
Yeah.
what's that say about them? And then that will affect their psyche so much, and then they grow up and they see their friends at school and they see their moms or dads, and then they only see one parent, so it's just harder for them. But it's
Yeah,
tough.
it is. But I mean, children shouldn't be in any way used as pawns in that kind of situation, or when a divorce is going to happen. But unfortunately, it pretty often happens. But in the end of the day, is a divorce, when you are in that kind of a relationship, is it really ruining the child's life? Because imagine that you are in that sort of relationship, you have a child, and nothing will change. If it changes, it usually changes to the worse when children are present. So in the end of the day, what you're doing, staying in that kind of relationship, you're teaching your child that this is how a relationship looks like. And that's something which probably we don't really want to do. I mean, I don't have children myself, but I was brought up in that kind of family, and I saw it since I remember. Like I was like 3 years old or something, and I remember how it was between my parents, how much manipulation there was, how much I was manipulated, and that's definitely not something that I would like my child to look at. So that's also, another thing. Is divorce really such a bad thing in the end, or is it somehow actually a better thing, because you can still move on, you can still have shared custody on your child, and well, at least your child maybe would see that one parent is happy if the other parent is toxic. I mean, of course, it's a sensitive topic, and probably there are as many opinions on that as many people, but it's also about finding this balance. What is actually a worse thing for a child? Staying in that kind of a dysfunctional family, let's call it as it is, or maybe, be able to see at least one parent moving on, and having a relationship that can be sort of like a role model relationship for the child. So I guess that's one thing. But I really liked what you said, Sibin, about this alternate reality.
Yeah.
And you referred to that as to all those family members who are trying to make excuses for your wife at the time, and creating this sense of maybe you getting the things wrong, things that she was saying or she was doing. But quite often in this kind of relationship, alternate reality is created actually by the partner who is manipulating. And one of that kind of techniques that I want to mention now is called gaslightning. And that's something that you may hear about, because these days there is a lot of people talking about narcissists, narcissistic abuse, gaslighting as well, as that's one of the common methods narcissists manipulate other people. And I just wanted to briefly tell a bit about that kind of a technique, because this is what it in fact is. It's actually creating the alternate reality in the relationship, and that happens by manipulating the other person, the spouse, or it can be also children as well, if there are children in a family. But that's about manipulating the other person in a way that they start questioning their thoughts, their sanity, and also their reality. So they start being really confused what is going on in a relationship, or what is going on with them. Basically, it's like having your own emotions and reality denied by your partner. And that can be done in many ways. but pretty often it's done by, the partner who is the one who manipulates. They can say different things, they can promise you different things, and for example then claim that that has never really happened. So it's like changing rules mid-game, and like just emotional abuse, let's say it straight. And how that look like, it's pretty often, when you start hearing on a daily basis things like, oh well, the thing that you're talking about, that has never happened. Or for example, well, I think you're exaggerating, I didn't really mean that. Or also, well, don't be so sensitive, right? That's that kind of things that can actually make you think whether you're not being gaslighted. Also, there is my favorite one, and that happens not only in romantic relationships, but I must say I personally had it at work, when one of my bosses was bullying me for a very, very long time, and I was really on the edge of a breakdown. And well, they told me at that time, I'm sorry that you're feeling this way. So, they do something, the partner that is the one that manipulates, they do something which is like abuse, that can be a regular abuse. And then if you tell them that you're not feeling happy with that, that you are upset, you would prefer them not to behave in that particular manner, they will tell you, I'm sorry that you feel this way. So it's kind of like telling you that, well, I'm not doing anything wrong, but well, if you feel like that, sorry that you feel like that, but it's not my fault at all. So, that is gaslighting. And I wanted to ask you whether you have a experience of something like that, because that's a quite common thing that is happening in relationships.
It is.
Oh, yeah, there are plenty of examples of that. I mean, not only in marriages, but also, like you said, in work relationship. Hey, you know what? I never promised you anything like that. I mean, when did that happen? Did I say that? You're just taking it too personal, and those kind of things.
Exactly.
So that's there. I mean, be it personal relationship, work relationship, or even friends or acquaintances. Yeah, those kind of stuff does happen.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with what Sabine said. I think again, it goes to like pride or insecurities, and I think like people like who are like that, they do like to try to manipulate other people or change their thinking so that the person who is doing the manipulation will actually feel good about themselves,
and they control the reality.
Yeah, and basically everything goes the way that they want, and it's harmful because you can only do that for so long. That after a while, the partner who you're controlling or gaslighting is just going to be like, you know what? Pardon my French, F you, and just be like, I'm out of here. And it's just one of those things where you just have to work together, and if you can't, then just mutually part ways and try to be friends if you can.
Well, the only thing that is quite difficult here is that many people, they don't really see it as a red flag, and they stay in that kind of relationships for, well, much too long. Because it's easy to say, for someone who maybe comes from a, super healthy family, they had really caring parents, they have a secure attachment style, but someone comes from a family like mine, for example, and that's not a very uncommon type of a family. When you had, well, one of your parents or both, in my case, were actually narcissists. For me, this was something that I actually saw as a normal way of interacting. I mean, I had my gut feeling even as a child that it's not normal, but then, it's much harder to realize in your adulthood that you are going into, through the same patterns that you know from your family of origin. Gaslighting is something that is quite common in toxic relationships when you have a partner that is, for example, narcissist. And when I was talking about gaslighting earlier, I forgot to mention why is it actually called like that, because we are talking about this alternate reality that toxic partners somehow create, to the extent that the other person, the other partner, starts being really confused about their own feelings, emotions, and reality. So just for those who don't know where the term comes, that comes from a play, quite an old play, I think from the 50s, which was called Gaslight. And in that play, that was also a movie later with Charles Boyer and Ingrid Bergman, the husband manipulated his wife by using a traditional ancient gas lamp where you have a flame and you turn it up or turn it down. So the husband wanted to get his wife insane. And he did that by dimming the lights in the room. For example, the wife was coming back from somewhere, and the lights were quite bright. And then she went to the bathroom or to change the clothes, and she came back to the living room, and then the lights were dimmed. And she asked the husband what happened, who dimmed the light, and he at that point was telling to her that, well, no one has done anything with the light. It's the same as it was. And in the end, after some time, the wife got insane. So that's where the term comes from. And well, it shows pretty well, I think, what this alternate reality means. But I also have quite a good example from real life of that gaslighting that can happen, and that's I have a permission of that person to tell about her story in that respect here on the today's episode. That's someone who is quite close to me, and I've known her for very many years. Well, I believe that what she was telling me about her relationship that has ended some time ago was actually as it was. And having her permission, I wanted to use an example of gaslighting that she was experiencing in that relationship for quite a few months, because it's like a typical example of this sort of manipulation. So the story was that she was together, and at some point she lived together with her partner. And before she had that partner, some time ago, she was in a relationship with another person who is known to that partner that she was in a relationship until recently. And unfortunately, that previous partner was quite manipulative as well, and also stalking my friend, also sending her text messages that she didn't really want to get from him. So like all the time, some sort of unsolicited contact. But anyhow, when she started a relationship with a new partner, and when she started living with him, this new partner at some point started, or from the beginning, really, probably she just noticed that at some point, he started controlling her quite much. So he knew that this guy was sending texts to her, so she had to every day show him what sort of texts she got. And, you know, she went along because she was like, okay, I have nothing to hide. I don't have anything to do with that other guy anymore. So, yeah, well, go ahead. Yeah, you can have a look at those texts that he's sending me. I'm not sending him anything back. I just prefer to ignore it. So this new partner was basically checking her mobile phone every day, which is kind of a strange thing. I mean, I wouldn't do that to my partner, and I've never had any partner who did that to me. But then, you know, the things were anyway getting worse and worse, because he was very jealous about that previous partner that was sending those texts. So he started being more and more controlling, and that at some point, after a few months, got to that extent. Of course, it was, you know, a gradual thing, but it got to that extent that my friend, after she has broken up with that new partner, she told me that she was so confused, because he started accusing her that when she was going to the town center, for example, to, you know, she had her own things, she had her own business, so she had some things that she had to care of, you know, she had to go to some office and do something, or, you know, normal things, or meet a client, or meet some collaborator. But this partner of hers, he thought that she was meeting this other guy. And, she was all the time bullied because of that. And she said that in the end, she actually was so unsure whether she was in fact meeting that previous guy or not. She was gaslighted to that extent that she in the end believed that, well, maybe there was something happening. And she said that thing that was for me was like really a neon red flag. But she said that, well, if he puts a camera in my car, I would actually be glad, because I would finally see whether I really go to do my business in the city center or whether I actually go and have some rendezvous with that guy. She was gaslighted to that extent that she completely didn't believe herself in the end, and she started accepting what her partner was telling her, that she is cheating on him with that other guy. And when you listen to something like that, you just think that this is absolutely insane. How an adult person can get to that point that they seriously think that putting a camera in their car may be a good idea because they will finally actually know what is going on, right? So this is how gaslighting works, and this is how toxic partners work. They make you completely confused. You don't believe yourself, you don't believe in your emotions, you don't believe in what you remember that happened. You start questioning everything. So that's a very, bad manipulating technique, but that's unfortunately the most common one that happens in that kind of relationships.
Yeah, I can actually relate to that. Not in a similar way though, but the way it was when I was with my ex-wife. She happened to. I mean, I never had the habit of signing off from my Gmail or my personal emails and all that stuff, right? So apparently, she got hold of my emails, my old emails, which I was writing when I was overseas to my ex-girlfriend, and she happened to read all of that. And one fine day, over a weekend or so, it started from there, wherein like started comparing the relationship between us and how it was with my previous girlfriend. I'm like, say, people are different. You behave differently with different people. There are a few things that I like to do with you. There are a few things that I would have loved to do when I was a lot younger, at that particular juncture, right? But then there was this constant comparison being made. It's as if like I'm in a relationship with two people at the same time. I was wondering, like, okay, so which one is real? I mean, is the one that I had with my ex-girlfriend real, or is the one that I'm having with you real right now? So what's happening? I started questioning the reality of things, and didn't know how to go about. But somehow, like I said, I was persistent in ensuring that my relationship with my ex-wife does work. So I somehow managed to get out of it, but it just kept haunting back. I mean, there were times when I would have left and I'm a little finicky about where I leave my things. There are places where I leave my keys, or there are places where I leave my phone, my wallet, and everything. So if I would know if someone has taken my phone and moved, right? And I mean, initially I didn't mind. I mean, like your friend, I didn't have a problem. Yeah, you can go ahead and check my phone. I don't care. There's nothing for me to hide. But then it became so much that even though there was nothing, but still the old conversation would come back, and I'm like, really, what's really going on, right? Where is this going? I mean, like, that person, I don't even know where that person is anymore. It was so long ago that I don't even know if that person exists anymore, which part of the world that person is. I have no contact, so why bring that up?
Yeah, but that's actually quite interesting what you're saying, because we are transitioning to the next manipulation technique. That's actually not gaslighting anymore that much. But that's something which is called triangulation. And as the name shows, it's like bringing a third person, by the person who manipulates, by this toxic partner, bringing a third person into the relationship in order to remain in control. And like a traditional triangulation usually takes place in families with children when, for example, one child is in a conflict that was pretty much induced by the toxic parent, and let's say one child doesn't have good relations with the other parent. So then this toxic parent becomes like a mediator between this child and the other parent, and the child and the other parent are communicating usually only through this other parent who is the one who manipulates, who wants to be in control of this relationship, it's the only person who has actually the actual view what is happening between those two people, because they both are manipulated by the person who is toxic. But in relationships, triangulation can also take a completely different, between two people can take a completely different form. And what is pretty often happening is what you said. There is a third person brought into a relationship, for example, in a form of comparing your relationship to the relationship that you had with a previous partner, or that the toxic person had with a previous partner. You can be also compared to some of his or her friends or coworkers. Sometimes it happens that people in toxic relationships can even be compared to some celebrities from Instagram. For example, if we think about, the looks. So yeah, there can be some, athletic, nicely looking celebrity being compared to you if you are in a toxic relationship. Also, triangulation can be done in a way that the toxic partner brings, let's say, an outside feedback to the relationship. So, for example, they say that, my mom thinks that you should be doing this and that, or, my best friend said that what you've done was, not nice, and you should not be doing this, you should be doing that instead, or something like that. So not only it feels like, we are not good enough, but it also, brings some jealousy into the relationship, and it's about someone who is not even really there, right? So there's like lots of discomfort and imbalance, and well, that's of course done again to seize power, control. Also, it gives attention to the toxic partner, right? Because they are in the center of this triangulation. So for them, it's like a kind of a game. So that's one of the things that quite often also happens. Have you ever had an experience of something like that, or have you seen, something like this happening to someone that you know?
I have. I know it's just one of those things where, like, I was the only child, but like I've seen it where sometimes like two parents like will show favoritism to another family member, and that happened to me growing up. And it always sucked, like they would always compare me to everyone else. Like they'd be like, "Oh, look at your cousin. He went to Harvard. You can do that too."
Oh,
And
yeah.
I'm like,
No.
okay, yeah, great. I don't want to go to Harvard or anything. It's just one of those things. And then people will be like, "What's wrong with you? Like, why aren't you smart?" And it's like, I graduated like 8th out of 333 kids in my class. Like, I wasn't valedictorian like everyone else, but I still was like in the top 2%. And I think that sort of triangulation and manipulation, I think, can affect your mentality. And then, like, in a relationship, they compare your marriage to like someone else and be like, "Oh, look at them, they're doing A, B, and C. We need to do A, B, and C." I'm like, no, we don't need to do A, B, and C. We need to do D, E, and F. Because
exactly. Not everything works for everyone.
Yeah.
if you try to copy everyone else, you're never going to have your own identity. You're never going to be authentic. And that's what the whole issue is. So, and I think that's just a problem now, that I think everyone is just insecure, or people are just dealing with their own insecurities and they just want to try to fit in.
Yeah, well, I mean, I haven't had anything like that in my romantic relationships, I must say, luckily. But yeah, I remember it from my family of origin as well. I was always compared to everyone else, and in a way, I had that advantage that I was the smartest. So I don't really have cousins that I would know of, but and could be as a better example of academic achievement, but I was always considered to be a difficult child. And to be honest, I don't know why I was a difficult child until today, but I was always, labeled as a difficult child. So everyone else was behaving better, though I was not doing anything wrong, but I was always, a difficult child. period. So that was my experience. So I know how it works. And of course, if you experience something like that during your childhood, that's even more devastating, because it's your formative years. So it's not really that cool. But yeah, unfortunately, that happens quite often in relationships. And well, those who were married or even in a long-term relationship were probably pretty often had to face the feedback that was brought by their partner from, their mother or his mother or dad or some aunties or someone else, and all this good advice that you get from outside, as we spoke in the previous episode with our previous guest, about those external influences that somehow get into the relationship and they are not really doing anything good to the relationship, right? And there is like one more way of manipulating that is actually quite common. I don't know whether you've experienced that, guys. I mean here particularly the technique which is called silent treatment. That's one of the most common techniques of manipulations, and it happens when, well, your partner just stops talking to you for some reason. And well, that's the thing. This reason is usually when, for example, they say something and you don't agree with that. And it doesn't really even have to be a huge argument that you have over something. It can be actually something small. But you wouldn't expect another person to stop talking to you for, well, weeks, maybe days for sure. And that's something that pretty often happens. I mean, I remember that from my family of origin, when my parents had that kind of silent days. And it's very, very, very bad thing to observe. And I think even worse thing to actually take part in it as one of the partners, because it's so frustrating. You don't know what is going on. And as a child, seeing parents behaving like that, it's quite devastating. You don't have this, you just feel like you don't know what is going to happen, right? And if you are a part of that kind of a couple and your partner is toxic and they, serve you silent treatment because you disagreed with them on something which is maybe not even anything very important, but, it's about seizing power, control. It's again about the same things. It's not really about the argument. It's not about moving on. It's not about trying to develop some sort of resolution to the conflict. It's just about having power, showing who's in charge. So is that something that you are familiar with?
In my childhood, yes, and it's a very funny experience. Not really my childhood actually. I think this was when I went overseas for my masters, and at a particular juncture, for some reason, for XYZ reason, my dad and mom had an argument over something, and I could see my dad doing this to my mom, wherein he would just
same here. Yeah, that was mostly my dad.
okay, he would just keep quiet. But the funny part is this, right? So he's not talking to her. My mom, she would go early in the morning, about 5 a.m. She would leave the house for her work. She was a nurse, and she would come back by 4 p.m. in the afternoon. So my dad, even though like they're not talking to each other, like one sweet husband he is, and a sweet person he is, he would ensure that the tea is made for my mom when she's come back. There's a glass of water ready. There's warm tea ready for her. Okay, but he would not utter a word. He would even have snacks ready for her, but no, not a single word. Like, okay, how's the day been? Or, I'm glad that you're back, and so on and so forth. And my mom called me one day and he's like, your dad's not talking to me. I was like, what happened this time? It's like, I don't know, some argument happened and so on and so forth. And now he's not talking. And she's like, what was the sweetest part? He still gives me tea in the afternoon when I come back. And I'm like, okay, that's so weird. That is so weird. I mean, I just told her, like, what? No love is lost. He's just a little upset. You know how he is. He's a little boy. You just need to, go and just give him a hug and he'll be fine. And that's actually what worked. I mean, all he needed was a little hug from my mom, and he was absolutely fine after that. I mean, it did go on for a couple of weeks. My mom didn't know what to do. I mean, like, I'm still getting my tea. I'm making dinner. He's eating it. I'm making breakfast and leave for him, and he's warming it up and eating it. but he just doesn't want to talk. So
Yeah,
it was that.
exactly, because that's how it works, you know. There is quite a lot of confusion behind it, and well, I mean, the example that you used is still quite sweet, though, I would say. But yeah, sometimes those silent treatments are really much worse. And for example, you know, this toxic partner can even use children to communicate with the other parent, yeah, with the other person in a relationship, and that's also quite bad, because we shouldn't be using children in any arguments or in any, you know, way make them to be mediators between the parents. But yeah, so silent treatment is also something that if it happens habitually, that's definitely a red flag. I mean, sometimes people get upset with each other, they may not speak for a day or two. That can happen. That's something that is not that uncommon. Sometimes we just maybe need some space for ourselves, you know, we need to cool our heads down. But when it happens habitually, when it's something that keeps coming every now and then and is not really, you know, initiated by anything that you would think that justifies that kind of silent treatment, then it's another thing that we should pay attention to in relationships, because well, adult people who are mature, emotionally mature, they tend to speak if they have problems, right? They try to figure out what they can do. They try to find some solution that is productive. And when you stop communicating with the other person, when none of this is going to happen, so that's definitely not something that anyone would, you know, recommend for a relationship. Not a way to solve any problems that may pop up in a relationship. Well, guys, thank you very much for this very insightful and exciting discussion. Well, Sibin, thank you very much for sharing your experience with us. That's, you know, that's not that common that people talk about that kind of thing. So I really appreciate that you decided to join us today and talk about toxic relationships and manipulation with us.
Oh, no problem. Nothing to it. I mean, it's over. I'm over it, and probably if I can help in any way, with by sharing my experiences, and others can learn and take the cues, and did the things that, you know, probably I should have done. You know, if it helps someone out, you know, I won the game. So it's good. It's all good.
Mm-hmm. What would be your advice to people who are maybe in a similar toxic situation in their relationship that's been going for very long? They try to fix it and nothing works. What would you recommend them to do?
The first thing I would suggest is try to sort your insecurities out with each other, because like Ashish mentioned, it's the insecurities that actually draws all these manipulations and toxic relationship, and at least in my case it was. So what I would suggest is, either if the insecurities are not resolving your issues, take a break from each other. Try to see, spend some time away from each other, because at times it does work. In certain cases, when you maintain the distance, you realize the true value of that person. If that doesn't work either, I think it's about time that, you know, you take the next step, which is just part ways. I mean, it's not going to work. It's not going to lead you into a healthy lifestyle. It's not going to be a happy life that you're looking for. I mean, you cannot expect that, okay, the light's going to shine on us and everything's going to be fine. No, it ain't going to happen. So it's time to walk away, take the bold
So
move.
it's pretty much about at some point, you know, leaving those pink glasses aside, and just having the awareness that, well, whatever you're trying is not really working, and instead of banging with your head against the wall, you probably have to move on. Well, thank you very much. That's actually a very good advice, because we tend to stick to our relationships and we always think that we can do something to fix them, but not always that is possible. So thank you very much for today. See you everyone in the next episode.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me. Thanks,
Okay.
Ashish. Thanks,
You're
Esther.
welcome.
Thank you.
Cheers. Bye.
Bye.